Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to be making wonton soup. I make my wonton fresh. Now for this I'm going to be using about 1.5 pounds of pork tenderloin that was on sale. You have to use extra lean pork for this. Do not use just the ground pork you'll find at the store. It's way too greasy. Usually I'd buy mine. If you have an Asian market near you, they usually do sell the extra lean ground pork, but this will work out fine. Like I said, it was on sale. And for this you'll need a pack of wonton wrappers. I don't get that hardcore to make my own. You can do that. For seasonings and for filling, I have some bamboo shoots here that I'm going to chop up very fine. I'm going to use the white parts only of a couple of green onions, some soy sauce, and some good rice cooking wine. Now if you can't get this type of rice wine, just a splash of sherry will do you fine. Now to start off with, make sure that you take your wonton wrappers out of the fridge. When you're not using them, do keep them in the fridge, but when you're going to actually make the wonton, make sure they're out for at least half an hour to soften up, or they'll break when you go to make them. I just went to dig out my wonton scoop. This is great for filling them. Now if you have an Asian market near you, they'll have this in the housewares section. If not, you can just use like a small teaspoon. For the filling, like I said, I'm just using pork and bamboo shoots today. You can use shrimp if you want to, but you have to make sure that it's fresh shrimp that has not been previously frozen, and if you're going to freeze them, you have to use them the first time. You can't refreeze shrimp, or any meat for that matter. Wash and trim the green onions. Now you can keep the rest of these and chop them up fine to put on the soup later. So when you've got the green onions chopped up that fine, just put them in your bowl. So after I open up the can of bamboo shoots, I'll just rinse some water. I'll leave the lid in and pour water in them and drain them out like that until they're pretty much dry. Yeah, so there's like a drop or two water coming out. That's fine. So just get them out and chop them up really fine. Here, when you got them that fine, just chop up the rest of them. So I got my meat grinder set up. Now what is important is you trim any tendon. I probably should be using my boning knife, but I already got this one out. If you do have a boning knife, yeah, do it for this, and just stick it under here and just draw it along. I don't want to lose too much, but you also don't want sinews going through the grinder. It can jam it up. After you've got your meat trimmed, just cut it into strips that will fit into the grinder. Nice part about tenderloin is all you have to do is do it in half. I've got the coarse grinding plate in first. I just set it on low. And if you've never ground your own meat before, honestly, I can't recommend it highly enough. There's nothing like it. And when it gets right down to the end, you can speed it up just to get the rest out. So I'm going to wash my hands again. I can't stress enough when you're handling raw meat to wash your hands before you handle it, during and after, especially if you're going to be freezing anything. You can do this with a spoon, but it takes forever. That's why I said just wash your hands really, really well. As you can see, I've swapped out the bowl that has got the bamboo shoots and the onions in it, and I'm just going to take a handful of this. I've switched out the plates to the narrow grind, and fill up the hopper. And I use a paper towel to turn this on so I don't have to touch it. For the narrow grind, I do put it up a notch to the second one because it just takes too long if you leave it on low. So once that's all ground up there, I'm going to season it and start making the wontons. So the next step is to season the meat. Now I just give it a splash or two. You don't want too much of the rice wine. I do put a fair amount of soy sauce in this, like a good cover. Okay, just mix that up. Your meat is really fresh like this. You shouldn't have to add cornstarch. What I do is I test it by pushing down on it with a spoon like that, and if it sticks together quite nicely, you're okay. If your meat is less than totally fresh like mine is, you may have to add a bit of cornstarch because you don't want these falling apart as you're making them. Okay, so get yourself set up there. I have some parchment paper. If you don't have that, use wax to set up on a cookie sheet. If you are going to be freezing these, just freeze them in a single roll. If you've got a chest type of freezer that will accommodate the size of the cookie sheet, and after they're frozen, just put them in a Ziploc and date them. I've opened up my pack of wontons. I've got the majority of them under a damp paper towel on a plate. These ones are ready to go. The first two are shot coming out of the pack, don't worry about it. When they're soft enough to work with, they're this pliable. So get yourself organized and just get your little spoon there ready. Separate one of these. Don't get too much because else it won't close properly, and just fold it over. Okay, like that, and just draw it up in your hand. Okay, and just set it down. That had a bit too much in it. I'll try a bit less with the next one. Okay, so get about that much. Put it on. Fold it over. Okay. And just pinch it between your fingers. You don't need to have to dampen this or anything. And if you'll notice, this looks, hey, just like the ones that come out of those frozen packages you buy at the store. I just took a fresh pack out of the wrapper. They will get a bit fragile at the end. So don't take out too many wrappers at once or they'll start cracking on you. Yeah, after a while you'll start turning into a machine on this. So you just pick it up, pinch it like that, and you're done. Okay, so I'm down to the last one. I'm out of filling. And I do have some wrappers left, but honestly, in this game, you're always better to run out of filling before you run out of wrappers, because the wrappers are way cheaper than the filling. And speaking of price, this whole thing costs me around $11, okay? And I know that if you're lucky and you get high quality ones at a Chinese market, maybe half of that pan is $8 or $9. So yeah, this is way cheaper. And you can put as much filling in them as you want. Now, at this point before cooking, I want them to set. Now, I don't want them to dry out to the point that they start cracking, but I do want to make sure that the seals at the top stay so they don't come apart in the boiling water. Because it's a two-step process. First you have to boil them, and then you reheat them up in the soup, but I'll show you that when I make dinner. And if supper is going to be delayed for a bit, what you can do is just put a piece of parchment on a plate and pop a damp paper towel over them and just leave them in the fridge like that until you're ready to cook them. So I've got the green onions chopped for garnish. And I'll take the wonton out of the fridge, see how they're looking. Yeah, those are just fine. Yeah, so they haven't come apart or anything. They're all still stuck together, which is good. Water's coming to a boil. So I'll be cooking them in this pot to get the excess starch off the wrappers. And then after, I'm going to heat up some soup in this pot here. So I'm putting in 2 containers. They finally made one that has no salt added at all. It was about time. And just set this on medium-low to simmer, covered. So the water's boiling and the soup is quietly simmering. And since these are fresh, do not just dump them in the water because you want to make sure they don't break. And you don't want them to stick to the bottom, whatever you do. So just put a few at a time on a strainer and just let them fall in. And ideally have the water come back to a boil before you put in some more. So once the wonton are in, keep them gently moving with a spatula, with a strainer. You can see they're starting to cook, but they're nowhere done. What's important is that they not stick to the bottom and not to each other as well. If you are going to make frozen and cook them from frozen, which you easily can, what is important is you let them defrost a little before you put them in the water. And when you do put them in the water, if they are stuck together, let them come apart on their own. Don't try to pull them apart or you'll just break the wrappers. Alright, so I'd say the wonton are right on the edge of being cooked. The purpose of boiling them here, as I said, is to get the starch off the wrappers so you don't have a gummy tasting soup. And I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see how cloudy the water actually is. So when the pasta of the wrappers is to the consistency you like it, again, like any other kind of pasta, some people like it overcooked, some people like it undercooked. I would not recommend cooking these too long. If you do, they will start to come apart. These have been fairly resilient so far. I haven't seen one break open yet. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start transferring these from the boiling water to the soup, which is just simmering. And after all this work, yes, you do want to do this by hand. One ladle at a time. You can put a plate underneath if you're worried about splashes on your stove. And just put that in the soup and go again. Yeah, when you start to see them really start to froth like this, it's time to get them out of the water, because they are going to start to break up right now. So after they've simmered for a while and you want to serve it, just get your strainer. And the nice part about making your own is you can put as much as you want. and some broth. I do serve this at the table with some soy sauce if the guests want to put some in, and also the onions are used as a garnish. You can put them in the soup if you want at the beginning, but they give a better flavor if you do it right at the end. So there's my wonton soup. I hope you liked watching it, and hope to see you again.